Hey Shyamal, thank you so much for joining us on this episode today. Thank you so much. What an honor having you on this show.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. I've been looking forward to this conversation. So super excited to deep dive into it.
Thank you so much. Shyamal, the more I talk about you, the less it is. And if I start talking about your accomplishments, I can talk about them for hours and hours together. But before we even touch on that, let me tell you, you're one of the finest human beings that I've personally come across. One of the most humble individuals that I've had the honor, and I'm not using the word pleasure only, I'm saying I've had the honor of interacting with. And as I've told you, that I would personally would want to walk a part of my life alongside. Whether we do some work together or we just walk and visit the ghats of Varanasi and experience the freshness of the air along the banks of Ganges, would love to have that walk with you.
Gaurav, that's thank you. It's such an honor to hear these words coming from you, and I can rest assured and tell you that we will walk a significant part of our journeys together, because I'm equally respectful, humbled, and honored to have been introduced to you through another fine human being. I think it's not a coincidence that these energies come together at a time when the planet needs these messages more than anything else. And if there's one thing that I've learned, that, irrespective of what that journey brings, the one thing it definitely brings is good energy and good friends. So I can, from my side, promise you that our paths are going to not cross, but they're going to be like interwoven through various different verticals of life. And it's a thought that makes me extremely excited.
I'm feeling very excited, and I'm looking forward to that journey ahead as we walk on this path. Thank you so much, Shyamal. Shyamal, you are a sports scientist by qualification. You have a clinical master's in childhood trauma. You work with adults and help them heal the subconscious beliefs that they have been carrying on in their life from the childhood. You have done a lot of work in the organizational psychology and behavior science, and you work with organizations. But I would love to hear from you what all you do.
Gaurav, that's such an interesting question. And it's a very tough question for me to answer, only because I spent my whole life fighting with marketing teams who keep asking me to pick one thing that I do. And the one thing that I do is I do everything. And I say this humbly because Western medicine, Western marketing, PR companies, everything that you look at that's propagated today, ask you to pick one. Everything splits everything into categories. Even you look at medicine, talks of the body and the mind, and then within the body, organs of it. And the problem is, in all of this, we realize, or we lose sight of the fact that we are truly connected and have never been separate in any shape and form. Okay. So in my approach to healing, in my approach to performance, I bring together understandings from human physiology and understandings from psychology. And really and truly, I didn't start off. It would be highly arrogant of me to say I planned to come to this point in my life. No, I didn't. I got knocked many times by many situations which led me here. The first knocking came from the apartheid, right? And whilst I was studying sports science, the first knock was before I even got into university. I realized that my journey as a professional athlete was limited, so I had to study. So I studied sports science because it gave me the best chance in my ignorance of actually staying in the area of sport. I qualified, I started working as a coach. I realized that even with this academic degree that I have, I was still, it didn't protect me from the perils of the apartheid, because the quota systems that came in play allowed one person of color to play in a team, but they had no quota for management. So which meant I was still sitting on the sidelines. The pain of that knocked me towards spirituality, where I started living in the ashram. Living in the ashram, listening to all the monks talking about everything. The first 1 year was a constant battle. I am trying to tell the likes of Bhakti Charuswami and Bhakti Chaitanya Swami and Radhanath Swami, the importance of the body and cut the ghee out and get the fat out and eat the sugar. And what are we trying to do? I remember clearly saying ISKCON food is like, are we trying to fast track the devotees to Sri Krishna because of how unhealthy it was? And then I realized through them when we spoke about it, and I realized through the power of association, the power of mind, that ISKCON knocked me towards understanding the mind. When I went into understanding the mind, that was a completely different labyrinth on its own. And I was deeply fascinated with thoughts and subconscious programs. And the only thing that dealt with subconscious programming at that place through an academic qualification was actually childhood trauma or childhood psychology, purely because we understood that the child's brain operates in what's called a theta brainwave state. And so, as you can see, I didn't plan any of this. I got knocked from one post to another. And with each step that I took, I had a fundamental understanding that don't leave what you learned behind. Bring it with you. It'll come to some use.
Beautiful.
And there's really something else interesting that I tell everybody. I said, when you come from a discriminatory background, when you don't have anyone fighting for you, you live by a certain rule. You say yes first and you figure out how after. And that is the thing. So every time an opportunity came up, I said yes. And then I figured out how to do it later. And when you're figuring out how to do something, the only thing you can lean on is what you know. You can't lean on anything else. So in saying yes to opportunities that I was probably not qualified for at the time, I had to lean on spirituality, lean on my understanding of the body, lean on my limited understanding of psychology, weave a thread to all of these to make me the most adequate person who stuck his foot into a door that probably didn't belong there. But that's how I got to where I am. And it's been a fascinating journey. And quite honestly, I still operate in the same manner.
Beautiful. And I'll tell you why I'm saying what I'm saying. Because when you started the conversation, you spoke about Radhanath Swami. And you used the word, I was knocked. And then we are speaking about the child psychology. And then we are speaking about the opportunities, right? Now, here's my relationship with all these four. I've had the honor of interviewing Radhanath Swami and spent enough and more time with him when I read his book called The Journey Home. And that's what we were talking about, in fact. And he is one of the most beautiful souls that I've come across. And then you spoke about how you were knocked. And I personally use this word that we all are being drifted. We believe that we have got choices. We believe we make choices. But at the end of the day, we all are being drifted in a direction. We are born in a particular country. You spoke about apartheid. So you were born in that country where you had to experience what was happening between and experience what it means to be in the middle of racism. So you're born in a particular country, you're born in a particular environment, you're born in a particular context, and that's the reason why you start showing up the way you start showing up. And I'm a firm believer, when the opportunity knocks your door, just say yes and dive in and then learn how to swim.
Yes.
So thank you so much for bringing all that together. That's a great beginning. Thank you, Shyamal. So Shyamal, help me understand. You spoke about the spiritual masters like Radhanath Swami. You spoke about what was happening to you when you thought that your sports career is not moving in the direction where you would like to see yourself playing. What was that moment that influenced your movement or your travel to India?
When I came to India, I'd really spent almost 3.5, 4 years in the temple. And I had there were a few moments in my life which I don't really talk about, which influenced both of them. Going into the temple was influenced by a loneliness I would not wish upon anyone, because I fought with my parents to walk down the path of trying to play sport. And they came from their family of jewelers and traders, so they were really in no position to help me. They lived in a small community. No one in my family played sport professionally, could understand or help me in that world. The ignorant, arrogant boy that I was forced myself into a certain plane. I go into the plane, and every single day you're faced with racism in various shapes. No one's saying something to you, but just the way they're talking to you. Simple things. Like I remember even when I was a coach coaching a team, and and one of my athletes said, I'll never forget it. I'm coaching him, I'm his coach, and he comes and he doesn't do well and he scores, and and he didn't score too many runs that day. And I go to him at the end of the day and I'm saying, it's a tough day, I'm really sorry, we'll get them. And I said something as innocent as that: tough day, really sorry. And he says, yeah, it's a tough day, but I'm not going out there to bat for you, don't worry. I'm like, it's so unnecessary. We are a team. What is the subtle difference in here? There were differences, and you know what the apartheid does? Actually, the biggest turning point in the entire thing, and this is what nobody understands about racism, right? About discrimination, any system, is that the system, when there's systemic discrimination and systemic racism, it's not that the system is bad against every person of color. No. It's that the system identifies a few people of color who they make the gatekeepers for all the other people of color.
Yeah.
So they turn you as a person of color against your own people.
Yeah.
So they look good.
Yeah.
You understand? Yeah. When that happened, I still feel like becoming teary when I realize what happens. When people don't understand, it's not that a white person comes up to you and screams at you and is vulgar. No. It's the subtlety of turning you against your own people and you not realizing it. That is when you start getting eroded from a core that you don't even understand.
Yeah.
And when that started happening, I couldn't come to terms with it. And that's when I moved into the temple.
Yeah. You use the word, your core gets eroded that you're not even aware of. I would like to double click on that, and I'll tell you from where I'm coming. I personally feel that whether we talk about hierarchies or racism or any kind of division, it brings more separation. Interestingly, universe, nature, don't believe in hierarchies. Universe does not believe in separation. So when you're saying, without you even realizing, your core gets eroded, what core are you talking about?
Your core is who you are as a person. You stop recognizing who you are as a person. I grew up in a spiritual family. I grew up with values of service. I grew up with values of community. We're Indians, we're Asians. We grew up in that unitedness. My parents, I grew up learning compassion and love. I grew up with all of these. I've been playing Indian music and singing kirtan from before I could even walk properly. That was the environment. And when I started getting into a system where I was the gatekeeper, I was being hard on people of color, right? Preventing them, telling them, you got to work 10 times harder to get here, right? And then
because I am white and I'm privileged one.
Yeah. So I was
without even earning that.
Without even earning that. So I was, as a person of color, I was conditioned to be harder on people of color than I was on a white person. Right. And that's what the system was doing to me. The system was fling the door open for them. Right. But if you fling the door open, no one will say anything. Right. And then what I was doing was forgetting. What it did to me was made me forget. In the click of a finger, overnight, it made me forget, shit, I came down that same road. My parents didn't have money. I came from there. I can't afford equipment. I can't do this. I'm hiking. I'm sleeping on the side of the roads. I'm forgetting the pains and struggles of all my fellow brothers, Africans and Indians and all those other people of color. I'm forgetting their pain. And all of a sudden, because the system tells me, you do this and we look after you. So looking after you comes at the burden of pain that everyone else has to endure. You see, it's so subtle, and none of that made me proud. The only thing that I can tell you is that up until that point in time, it was the 18 years of growing up in such a spiritually strong family and growing up in a family that constantly brought love, kindness, and compassion to everything that allowed me to inflect before it was too late.
Yeah. And I personally feel that's a blessing. That's the family you were born into. And I'm not talking about a South African family or an Indian family or an American family or an Australian family. I'm saying you were born into a family where you were taught, you were born into love, you were born into freedom, you were born into kindness, you were born into compassion. What would you
Yes.
call? Is that you have earned it? Is it your choice, or you're being drifted into that?
I could have been drifted into it. The one thing we do know as Hindus is that wherever we're born, there's so much that's played a role in how you get there and how you got there, and the role it plays. Uh, and I think it's a coming together of so many things, isn't it? And uh, this is where parenting is so important. Parenting is so important because learning how to support without inflicting trauma, learning how to be supportive and be nourishing, learning how to create an ecosystem for a child to make their mistakes but feel safe enough to come back is so important. And that's the thing. Gaurav, I'm saying this, I didn't expect this podcast to go in this direction, and I'm a little emotional. One of the biggest things that I tell everybody is that we all try to learn from the Elon Musk, and we all try to learn from the Bill Gates and the Warren Buffett and the Vijay Shekhar Sharmas and all of these guys from there. Some of the greatest lessons you will ever learn on earth are from the people whose names you don't even know, from the people who don't even have Instagram accounts or social media accounts. Those are the people who teach you lessons that help you align with your core. And those are the lessons that you'll carry not just along your life, but you'll carry from generation to generation, from birth to birth.
Thank you, my friend. And if you allow, shall we walk the same path where we are on to right now?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Shyamal, I'm a firm believer that all of us are born into dysfunctional families. At the same time, I'm a firm believer you just need one person in your entire family to release the next generation of the reactive patterns and the past wounds that you've been holding and gift them a new generative future.
Correct.
Having said that, you work with adults and help them heal the childhood traumas.
Yes.
What's the process that you follow? How easy or tough is it for you when you walk that path alongside? Because I personally feel it's really painful.
Well, it's super painful. There are 5 steps to healing any pain in the world. And we can elaborate on each of them. Step 1 is willingness. There must be a willingness to want to heal or a willingness to change. 99% of the people on the planet have desire. 1% of people are willing to do what is needed. Now, when you have willingness, step 2 comes in, which is awareness. Only with willingness can awareness come in. You understand? And awareness is a very broad subject. You could be aware. Let me give you an example. You could be aware that I have no money in my bank, right? But when you're willing to work hard to bring money into your bank, your awareness of what to do increases. So the general awareness that's there, everyone has it. But the awareness of what to do is hand in glove with willingness. So then after willingness comes awareness. After awareness comes acceptance. Acceptance of your current situation. Right? You accept your current situation. After you accept your current situation, then comes empowerment. Right? Empowerment is taking the responsibility to shift that action. Right? And after empowerment comes focus, focusing on what you need to do. So when I'm working with people who are in trauma, the first thing I'm trying to shift is their willingness to do something. I'm peeling away layers of understanding the root cause of that trauma. When you're working with an adult, it's really tough because the adult doesn't want to put a magnifying glass on the issue that's actually causing that. They've hid it away for so long that they don't even recognize it. And their ego won't even allow them to acknowledge that that's the problem. So healing childhood pain requires a phenomenal amount of vulnerability. It requires a phenomenal amount of trust. And you have to trust. And this is the interesting thing. Most people don't trust it because they think where they are is fine, not realizing that where they are is probably 10% of where they could be. And you ascertain where you are right now based on external metrics, right? And I wish we had a way in which you could quantify and you could tell someone, you know what? Yeah, you have $10 million in the bank, but that 10 million, right, should have been by now 110 million. If you only addressed XYZ problems in your psychology or mindset, I wish this tool existed out there. Because why? That $10 million is a blessing, but it's also a curse. It's such a distraction. It's a distraction from where you need to put the magnifying glass on what you need to heal.
Yeah. This is so interesting. I don't know how all the stars are getting aligned, because the other day I was talking to another friend of mine and we were discussing that actually there's nothing called accomplishment. There's nothing called failure, because the context where you're born into, that defines your accomplishments and your failure.
Yeah.
And it took me some time to understand that and take one step ahead, because if you're born in a society where the currency is not dollars, or the currency is not the pound or the rupee, that's the parameter on which you're evaluated on. Just imagine if the currency is kindness and the compassion and the love, everything would shift for you.
Totally.
Right? Now, you also spoke about that the ego does not allow an individual to walk that path. One, because they feel that they are very comfortable wherever they are, and they don't want to get out of that. That's possibly one reason. The other reason could be it's a painful path that they'll have to restructure everything within and without. The third could be fear of losing whatever little that they've been able to accumulate for themselves in terms of money, in terms of recognition, respect, relationships, from where they can actually get their dependency from, and whatever ABC factors that they have. Now, in that case, what is it that an individual, another coach can do that could allow this person to start to move in that direction? What could be a possible role of a coach or a facilitator or another individual or a human being?
Yeah, that's such a powerful question, and unfortunately, we live in an interesting world. I'll give you one example of what I try to do. I'm not a massive fan of, like, people call me, hey, you're a sports scientist, you're a psychologist. I try to not even use any of these titles. Why? Because I got those degrees in 99, 2001, 2008. As a rule of thumb, I keep telling people, I say, you'll get to a stage, everyone gets to a stage in life where you don't need a resume, isn't it? They ask you for your profile or your bio, which is half a paragraph you write yourself. Okay. I said, let go of everything that's more than 5 years old. Let it go. Don't even talk about it. Right? Just let it go. Because every time you hold on to something that's really old, you're anchoring who you are to that old personality. Right?
You're identifying yourself with that.
Yeah, you're identifying yourself and it's pulling you back.
Yeah.
Right? And your soul is trying to move forward. Your energy is trying to move forward, but you're consciously pulling yourself back there. And the reason you're pulling yourself back there is for acceptance.
Safety.
Acknowledgement, acceptance, safety, whatever. Yeah.
Security, yeah.
You define your word. Right. Now, the first thing we have to all let go of is we have to let go of that fear of judgment. Fear of judgment is creates the biggest paralysis of action there is. Okay. You're scared of how someone's going to perceive you. And as a result of that, you hold on or you grasp onto everything you think you need so that the perception seems a little bit better. But you realize if you can let go of another person's opinion of yourself, you give yourself the greatest liberation there is. Okay. You give yourself freedom. You liberate yourself from external opinion.
Mm.
And then you're truly liberated in every shape and form.
Yeah.
And what is ego? Ego is anything on the planet that makes you think you're fractionally better than someone else is ego.
Mm.
Anything. And some people don't even realize that the subtlety of chanting even has ego attached.
It has.
If I chant 16 rounds of Maha Mantra every day, but that guy only chants 10, you're done.
It has a lot of ego.
It's done. If you say, I do Sudarshan Kriya every day and he doesn't, you're done. It means nothing. Your entire spiritual journey is melted away in that very moment. And that's why, I don't know if you've ever noticed this. I was having this beautiful conversation with Bhakti Charaswamy, who's my late spiritual master. And he said, Shyamal, have you ever noticed in every place that's highly consecrated with spiritual energy, and there are lots of them across different faiths, if you walk into any of those cities, any city, you look at Vrindavan, Mathura, Dwarika, Tirupati, Mount Kailash, you look wherever you want to go, any faith under the sun, right? The people in that city are really living with the most basic of stuff, isn't it? And he says, have you ever asked yourself, if God was there, and those people are so close to God, why don't they have all the luxuries? Why aren't all of the biggest temples and the richest buildings and the most luxurious hotels all in those places? Why is everyone in every place? And no one's engineered this. No city's managed this. This was not anyone's grand scheme. It's just happened like this wherever it is, right? And he says, because that when you get closer to God, those people who are close to those consecrated places of energy are really and truly old souls at the fag end of their journey. This is probably their last birth. And, they're born into these situations where they get as little opportunity to attract anything that could hold them back here. They're living below the opportunity to look down on someone, below the opportunity to, they're just there, existing on bare necessities, basics.
So beautiful.
The ego is not even given a chance to flourish. Now, for us on the other side, who are not as blessed as those people, right, we have to work very, very hard, right, to make sure that the ego is in check every single day.
Every moment
of every day, in every conversation. We have to constantly check it. And I tell this to people, Gaurav, I said, are we going to make mistakes? We're going to make mistakes every single day.
Yeah.
What you need to do is, when you realize you make a mistake, put the ego aside, pick up the phone, write an email and apologize for how you said it was, because you'll grow through facing your mistake face on. So if you, in a moment of anxiety, in a moment of high pressure situation, spoke to someone in a manner that you shouldn't, or said something that could have been condescending, or something, and if it's sitting on you, face yourself, face that fear, pick up that phone, irrespective of who they are, and said, I was reflecting, this is what happened, and you may have not taken it in the manner that I did, but I'm feeling this, and I just want to say I'm sorry.
Yeah. You are not saying sorry just for the other person. You're saying it to heal yourself. Recently I published a video on LinkedIn where I spoke about impact and intentions. We judge others by their behaviors, and we judge ourselves based on our intentions. Isn't that different rules for different people in the same game called life? And even if I've said something that unknowingly, unconsciously I've hurted the other person, and it has created an impact which is not in alignment to what I was anticipating or expecting, do I have what is required to go call that person and apologize? So thank you for bringing this beautiful conversation around ego as well. And I personally feel that ego is a god. That's how I define ego, Shyamal. Ego is a god that has been created by our soul to protect itself, and how it's so important for us to let go of that ego moment by moment, so that then there comes a time when we experience oneness with the universe. And as
Yeah.
you were talking about identity, how every moment I can let go of, whether it's my accomplishments, the money that I've earned, the rewards and the recognition that I have, the accolades that I get from people, moment by moment. We have spoken about Ramana Maharishi, and he talks about who am I? And he said that it's okay to revisit the witness, the observer who's asking that question. I think that's another beautiful journey to keep a check on our ego and look at who we are and who we are becoming. And such beautiful conversation, Shyamal. Thank you so much for bringing so much of richness in this conversation.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. I mean, it's beautiful. You know, what you're saying about what Ramana Maharishi says. And there's a beautiful exercise that I do with all my clients to help revisit that, to actually help discover who they are. And, you know, it's a beautiful one-on-one thing. And sometimes I'm just doing it, even if I'm doing it online. You know, it's based on Ramana Maharishi's philosophy of who am I. I ask two questions repeatedly. Right, each question is asked for about 1.5 to 2 minutes.
Mhm.
And the first question I ask a person, looking at them in their eyes and they look at me, is I ask him, who are you? And he tells me one thing about him. And I said, who are you? And he tells me another thing. And I say, who are you? And he's got to keep answering this. He doesn't know how many times, you know, and each time he's got to tell me something. I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm someone who likes chocolate, I'm a carer, I'm this, I'm whatever. Describe yourself in whatever shape and form you want. And I ask that question so many times that I peel away every layer that he consciously has, and then I'm going into every subconscious thing. And once that's done, I go into a beautiful exercise where I repeat the same thing, but not who am I. I ask them, who are you pretending to be? Right? Who are you pretending to be? Who are you pretending to be? Who are you pretending to be? And then they tell me stuff. I pretend to care when I don't care. I pretend to don't care when I actually do care. I pretend to know when I actually don't know. I pretend to be brave when I'm actually scared. I pretend to be loving when I'm so distant. I pretend to not be scared when I am vibrating inside. I pretend that I have to pretend to belong in this world. I pretend. They just go on and on. And every single statement that they make, this exercise I record and I send them a video, because every single statement that they make is a wall that they've built that is a wall of ego. It's the ego that's forced you to build that wall.
Absolutely.
And that's the wall we need to break down. So
Yeah.
this is an exercise in understanding your ego walls and
Yeah.
then knowing what we need to break down.
Absolutely. In fact, I personally tell people that pretense comes from a space of fear, which is from the same family of ego. So let me just switch the gears, Shyamal, here. You do work with professional athletes, you work with professionals from corporates.
Yeah.
Just curious, do they understand this language of
Not all
ego,
of them.
of who are they, going into the identity conversation? Do they understand this conversation?
No, not all of them understand the language I'm speaking, and I don't use this language with all of them. A lot of them, I'm addressing the key problems that they have, and I'm bringing perspective to it. Like, for example, yesterday I had a conversation with a very senior executive who is tossing between, and this conversation has been going on for 6 weeks now, where she has multiple opportunities to move into director level roles in some of the biggest companies and investment funds on the planet. You know, funds that have a billion, 1.25 billion, $2 billion funds, and she could head it up. And she's been having multiple conversations. And every time I ask her this conversation, she's like, you know, but my heart is truly set on doing my own thing, right? And I'm saying to her, so the problem she presents with is, my heart is set on something, but I'm distracting myself by entertaining myself with these other conversations that look so beautiful. And what I keep telling people is that the language that I'll use to my athletes and the language I'll use to my corporates is that my job as a coach is to bring you as close to working and operating in alignment with your core value system as is humanly possible.
Yeah.
And notice that every time I bring you closer and closer, the level of distraction that presents itself will be greater and greater. Okay. You will be most distracted when you're operating most in alignment with yourself. Okay. And that is when we must challenge fear and challenge judgment and challenge silence everything and start listening to what will guide you towards your true north. Nothing is more scary, right, than operating from the true essence of who you are. Because the true essence of who you are,
Shayamal, please say it again.
nothing is more scarier than operating in alignment with who you truly are.
Beautiful.
And the reason why I'm saying this is because when you operate from who you truly are, nothing that the world tells you is success will come with ease. That's why it's scary. Because why? Those billion-dollar checks are not going to be falling in.
Absolutely
Those
not.
big telephone calls, those network things, those big high-flying jets, they're not going to come with ease. No. Because there's a different operating system that attracts that. And that's not the operating system of the who am I true self.
Absolutely.
So you have to find the balance between what is success for you, how do you want to attract it, what is the means you want to do it, and I try to navigate my athletes, whether they're athletes or whether they're corporate executives, to the definition of success, that success is the courage to listen to your heart, okay, the strength to accept, the strength to act in accordance with its guidance, okay, and then the courage to accept the consequences of those actions. That for me is success. So listen to your heart, accept the direction it guides you, and have the courage to accept the consequences of that direction.
Yeah. It sounds very simple, Shyamal. It sounds very simple the way you have defined it, but I know what you're talking about, because what you're talking about is living a intent-driven life rather than goal-driven life. You're talking about living a purpose-driven life, a value-driven life, which is not that easy, because just going out in the world and saying, this is what I really care for, requires a tremendous amount of courage. Sometime back, I was writing a mission statement for myself. And this is what I wrote. I said, I stand for holding the space for others with compassion, where they can live their life from a space of shukrana, courage, self-acceptance, joy, and possibility. And if you look at any word that I've spoken about, whether it's self-awareness, shukrana is gratitude, courage, joy, and possibilities. And few days back, we spoke about what are the three most important questions. And I spoke exactly what you're talking about. I spoke about what matters in life, who am I, how can I find freedom in everything that I'm doing, anywhere. So thank you for this validation, I think, Shyamal. And if it's coming from you, then deep down, I know I'm moving in the right direction in my life. And as you always share, that trajectory is more important than achieving the goal. So thank you. Last time when we spoke about Shyamal, you spoke about that you have created a framework. It's known as the balance method, where you specifically work with athletes, professional athletes, and of course, professionals from the corporate arena, and where you assist them or you coach them to bring in alignment at the body, mind, environment, and the relationship level. Tell me more about that. Very curious to know.
The balance method was discovered because, I needed to bring in the worlds of spirituality, science, psychology. And I really looked at what is it that helps a person find themselves and discover themselves. Okay. And the four verticals of balance are body, mind, relationships, and environment. And body is the food you eat and how you move. And really what it fundamentally means at a premise level is your body is the vehicle for your mind. A healthy body will mean a healthy mind. So go. The mind vertical looks at the quality of your thoughts, your mindfulness, your meditation, how still the mind is, really and truly. Okay. So that's what we're really looking at in the mind. Relationship is looking at the depth and quality of the relationships of people you interact with. We hear through many spiritual practices, they say you're a byproduct of the people you associate with. In temples, they'll ask you to take the association of more enlightened devotees. Why? Because you embody that energy and they guide you in that direction. In the Western world, we call it mentors. Okay. And environment is everything that you can touch, see, smell, taste, and hear. All of these things have the potential to help you achieve your direction or be a distraction from it. Now, when I look at the five senses, I keep telling people, and this is probably the easiest example I can give someone. I said, if you're sitting in a beautiful room, right, and you're meditating, let's imagine someone's closing their eyes and they're meditating, okay? And let's assume you're sitting next to an ocean or you're sitting in a beautiful garden and there's no noise or there's nothing in there, okay? You'll be able to be very tranquil and you'll be able to still your mind, okay? Now, let's bring in those elements, right? If I switch that garden, all right, to sitting and looking at a massive freeway with lots of noise, the probability of stilling the mind disappears. Makes it incredibly difficult.
Absolutely, yes.
If I put you in the middle of a train station where you have all of this noise coming in, it's done. If I put you in the middle of a sewage dumpster where you can close your eyes but you can't miss the smell, right? It'll completely distract you. So all of the elements, right? If I put you on a surface that's extremely hot or extremely uncomfortable, you can't focus, So the elements have the ability to help you achieve a goal or be distracted from a goal. So the environment vertical is to help people draw their awareness to how your environment can align to help you become a better person, discover who you are, and achieve your goals or move in that right direction, the trajectory of where you're moving. And then really and truly, it all comes together around what I call the balance formula. And in balance formula, I really break a few myths around balance. The first myth that we try to shatter around balance is that balance in the Western world, we've always been thought of balance as symmetrical, as equal and opposite, Newton's third law. It's depicted in every form of balance when you look at something is static and it's balancing. So you're looking at counterweights and all of these things. But the truth is that balance is not static. Balance is fluid and dynamic. It's changing every single second, right? And balance is asymmetrical. It's not symmetrical. And if you look at the golden ratio, which is how everything in nature unfolds and everything in cosmology, how it's presented, the golden ratio is an asymmetrical diagram of balance. Okay, nothing in it is symmetrical. It's asymmetrical in every shape and form. And if you look at fluid and dynamic, if you look at the relationships in nature, it would take, as I speak of in breed, believe, balance, it would take a population of 100 wolves to keep a rabbit population of 10,000 in check. It's not 1:1. You can't have one wolf for every rabbit that's out there. When you look at your blood sugar, you could eat a cake that has 30 grams of carbohydrate or sugar in it, right? But your body would need to secrete, 1 milliliter of insulin to bring that 30 grams back. So balance in its most natural form is fluid and dynamic, and it's asymmetrical. And then when you look at balance in a physical form and reality, the one thing I tell people is that Archimedes says this. He says, if you give me a fulcrum and a lever long enough, I can move the world. Now, the fulcrum is the central point around which things are balancing. And the integrity of that central point is very, very critical to balance. Okay. And the example that I give in my book is, I'm saying if you try to balance something on a square cube, flat square cube, it's relatively easy. If you try to balance something on a nail stuck into a ground, it becomes a little bit more difficult, but you'll get it done. If I try to balance something on a water balloon, it becomes even more difficult. And the only thing that's changing in all of these is the integrity of the fulcrum, the central point. Okay.
So
and
beautiful.
in life, I explain to everybody that you are the fulcrum in your own life. Okay. And the verticals in your life are body, mind, relationships, and environment. And these four verticals are fluid and dynamic. And the ability to bring these four verticals into balance is directly proportional to your integrity. And your integrity is how well do you know yourself? So how well can I answer the question of who am I without the labels and the money and everything that I have in there? And that's the beginning of it. And I go into really breaking down things called the anchoring pillar, which is your stabilizing point. I define the comfort zone and how to challenge the comfort zone through the balance method. And in a nutshell, it's the anchoring pillar is your honing beacon. The honing beacon is that area that brings you the deepest fulfillment and success with ease. And it could be your relationship vertical. Say you generate the happiness and joy and bliss from your family relationships with your wife and your kids and your mom and dad and whoever. And because that is so strong and so anchoring, you can go out at work and push yourself, get out your comfort zone, challenge yourself, because challenging the comfort zone brings in a level of insecurity and instability. And instability brings a feeling of uneasiness, right? So that uneasiness is counteracted by the balance in this vertical.
So in the field of relationship, that the kind of relationship that I actually enjoy and cherish with my family members and my loved ones and my friends.
Yeah. So I'm saying that would be the balancing component in terms of how you challenge the comfort zone. Like, for example, a professional athlete, could have a balance in his relationship vertical, or he could have his body as his strongest vertical. Okay, which means that if he's struggling, and we see this a lot with my athletes, if they're going through a lot, then they put their shoes on and they go on for a small run. Okay, because when the body is moving, they feel at best, their mind gets still. So that anchoring pillar is where your mind can really relax and you can be effortlessly and easily just exist in that space and come back to that honing energy before you take on the world again. So this is really what I bring forth in the balance system as such. And this is what I teach athletes. I teach them how to identify these various pillars, how to optimize all of these various pillars.
And I love the analogy of the fulcrum that you brought in. So that means it boils down to the fulcrum, boils down to the self-awareness. I'm just curious. I don't know why is it coming to me, and if there's any relation at all. I personally feel that all of us vibrate at a different level of consciousness.
Yes.
Where do you see, where's the relationship between consciousness and awareness?
The relationship between your consciousness and your awareness, that piece of information comes down to the relationship with you and your environment. And that piece of literature is best described in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras as the 5 states of mind. Okay. And that's a beautiful piece of research that was pointed in that direction. And that's even in my book. Patanjali speaks of the 5 states of mind as Sipta, Mudra, Vikshipta, Ekagra, and Niruddha. Let me explain to you. So the first 2 states of mind, Sipta and Mudra, are people who are directly impacted by the environment. You change the environment, they are impacted by it, right? Okay. No matter who they are, you throw them to any ecosystem, they would mold that ecosystem in a period of time. Vikshipta, which is the 3rd state of mind, is a person starts becoming a little bit more aware of who they are and the awareness of higher levels of existence or altered states of consciousness. So they realize that through meditation, through breath work, through spending time with spiritually enlightened people, I can elevate above the stress of the world. Okay, so that's Vikshipta. The problem with Vikshipta is that the person can't sustain that state. So they'll do their meditation, but 30 minutes after they finish meditation, they back down to the stress of the world and they're impacted by it.
Yeah.
Okay. The 4th state is called Ekagra. Ekagra is where a person can hold an elevated state for a prolonged period of time. So you would see this like a Radhanath Swami, like a elevated monk, they embody that feeling of enlightenedness for prolonged period of time. They're there, that. And it doesn't mean that they don't get impacted. They get impacted, but not as often as everyone else. And Radhanath Swami may be actually in the fifth category of enlightenment with someone who I refer to as like a Dalai Lama, which is Niruddha.
Yeah.
Niruddha is where the person changes their environment, right? So when they go into that environment, the whole environment changes around them. They mold it. Now, I normally give this example, which is a very, very rudimentary type example to explain all of this. So I'm saying, let's imagine someone's hosting a party in the night, okay? And you go to this party, and you go to the party saying to myself, I'm not going to have a drink tonight, right? The person makes that decision before they go. Now, the first two states of mind, soon as the person goes into that environment, they would be consumed that environment. They'll start perhaps having a drink or doing whatever they want to, right? They mimic whatever's happening in that environment. In state number 3, the person would go into that environment and they would hold strong for a good couple of hours, right? They'd be able to say the stay true. Okay, maybe they'll be there 2-3 hours later, maybe late in the night after they've been there, they're tired, they may give in to that situation, right? The fourth state of mind is a person who would go in and he'd be true to what he says, right? He can hold his state of mind and be there the whole night, and it would not impact him at all. Okay. And then the fifth state of mind is that there's a very rare, special person who, when they walk in the room, everyone will leave their glasses down.
Beautiful.
Right. So that is what will happen when a Dalai Lama would walk into a room with a party. Everyone would just leave the glasses. He wouldn't have to say anything, but that behavior would do that.
Who he is being or who she's being. And while I'm listening to you, it reminds me of the kind of work that Robert Keegan has done in the space of adult development, or the 5 levels of leadership when we talk about. And what we are talking about, level 4 and level 5, is the integral or unitive leadership, where we don't separate ourselves from the other person, where who I am impacts the environment that I'm a part of, where there's only unison. And I remember my conversation with Radhanath Swami, where he spoke about the very purpose of yoga, and the word comes from union, and religion is religare. The very purpose of religion and union and yoga is to bring people together. And when we have people who are vibrating at level 1 and level 2, the moment they will come inside that kind of environment, they're only going to divide that in order to feed into their ego and their need for power and authority and supremacy.
Yeah. Yes, true. Well put. I like this. I'm going to do a bit of reading on this leadership model. It's quite interesting. Yeah. It stitches in. And a lot of these leadership models that we see in organizational psychology, Gaurav, are borrowing from spirituality.
Absolutely,
are borrowing
yes.
from the Gurukul system, are borrowing from Patanjali states of minds, from the spiritual 5 levels of consciousness, from altered states of consciousness, from Ramana Maharishi's work and the transcendental meditation movement. They're borrowing from that, actually. We're just using a different type of language to express it in the world. Yeah.
Precisely. You do a lot of work in the space of intuition and flow, and especially when you're working with athletes. Of course, one of the most important things is to help them tap into their flow as often as possible. So what's your take on that? How would you define intuition?
My definition of intuition is really being guided by a higher intelligence, right? That's what's happening when you are listening to intuition. You're listening to your purest, highest form.
Being a channel.
And people, when you talk of intuition, the first question people ask you is, how do you know it's a voice coming from up and it's not your subconscious speaking to you?
It's not coming from your past assumptions, or it's not coming from your beliefs.
So I said, that's a very good question. And to answer that question, you need to understand where the mind can go to understand what that voice can sound like. And let me break it for you. The mind can go into one of 2 places. It can go into the past, or it can go into the future. Okay. And if it goes into the past or the future, it can be thinking of something negative, or it can be thinking of something positive. Right. So realistically, 2 becomes 4 places that it can be in: past or present, future, positive, and negative.
Yeah.
Now, if it's going to the past, and it's going to something that's positive, okay, then the voice that speaks to you from that place will be a voice of overconfidence because it's relying on old success. Okay.
Oh, I can do
If
that. I've done that in the past.
Yes, exactly. That's
Yeah.
overconfidence. If the voice is from the past negative, okay, then there is fear.
Yeah.
It's a
Doubt.
fear of the paralysis of action. There's self-doubt that comes in. Yeah, right. Now, if the mind is going to the future and you're future positive, then you're premeditated. The mind is premeditative. It's already chalked out the path to success without understanding that variables can change.
Yeah.
Okay. And if the mind is in the future negative, then the voice would sound like a fear of failure.
Yeah.
Like procrastination or like a paralysis of action.
Anxiety, anxious.
Exactly. Anything in the future is anxiety, anxious, all of these things. Now, a voice, intuition won't have any semblance of these emotions. Intuition will be, it will feel pure, it will feel guiding, it will feel non-judgmental. You understand?
Tell me more about non-judgmental part. And also what I'm listening is, if it's not past, if it's not future, so I'm assuming there's an element of timelessness.
There is an element of timelessness. And intuition doesn't scream at you, it whispers to you. So that's the important thing to know. It's not a harsh voice that's saying, do this, do this, do this. It's a gentle nudge, right? And it's very gentle. So, and it's coming very, very gently, just guiding you through this, just nudging you along. And you just got to trust that part. It comes in brief moments. It comes in the moment. So it's not going to come half an hour before the event. It's coming 1/100th of a second before the moment comes. It's not information you can't tap into intuition about how to react half an hour before or even 5 minutes before. It happens right in that moment.
Yeah.
It just drops. Doom. That's it. Right? So you have to be very in tune with that. Now, when I'm working with athletes, I'm telling athletes that in a high pressure environment, in a fast moving high pressure environment, very often you do not have the luxury of time to rationally perceive a situation. Okay, events are happening far too quick for the rational mind to run through its options and make a rational decision. You are operating from 2 points of view, right? And this is where Stephen Kotler and Csikszentmihalyi come in. Csikszentmihalyi and Stephen Kotler come in from a point where they're saying that it is automation of skill that drives flow states, right? Which means that the more you practice something, the more perfectly you transfer a skill to an automated subconscious state, you can rely on that in your inner flow state.
Okay? But that's the subconscious you're talking about.
It has to be transferred. Everything's transferred to the subconscious. Yeah. In sport, you play sport from a subconscious state of mind, not from a conscious state of mind. You start off in a conscious state of mind, but you're operating subconsciously. For example, a cricketer starting to run, right? He starts his run up consciously. He delivers the ball subconsciously. Conscious means what? You're thinking about it. You're not thinking about everything that's happening in delivery. It's just happening. It's happening through the automation of skill in the subconscious mind. Okay. Skill automation through the subconscious mind, that's really the driving force in flow states. But what happens in flow states is something really special. It's your ability to navigate external variables, right, through a heightened sense of awareness and skill automation. And my entire theory is that information is downloaded to you, right, from a higher source. That fraction of a second, that piece of information that helps you navigate that is not in your automation state. Why? Because most of the variables that you're dealing with in high pressure competition states are not variables you've dealt with at the same speed and at the same timing in practice for it to have been safely transferred to
Yeah.
automation.
Yeah. And even if you have dealt with something similar, you'll not be able to replicate that because, as you mentioned, it's the variable environment. And if I'm already thinking about that in my mind, I'm not creating that space from where it can flow through me, right?
Yes,
I'm
exactly.
becoming an interference for a superpower
Yeah.
to show up through me, and what we
Yes.
call as intuition and tapping into your flow.
That's exactly what flow is. And what I try to do with athletes is I try to teach them how to trust that voice.
Mm.
And how we teach them to trust that voice is I start quantifying what that voice feels and sounds like, and I add a score to it. Right. And how this would happen would be in practice. For example, sometimes I hook up my athletes to mics and I have a receiver where I'm listening to them. And every time there's a thought coming in, I just train them to speak that thought out and speak those options out. And, it could be as subtle as, listen, a bowler's bowling the 19th over and he's defending, and let's say he's bowling to Dhoni and he feels, what, I should bowl a slow ball bouncer. I said, interesting. I make a note of that, slow ball bouncer.
Mm.
And then I look at what he did. Right? Did he bowl a slow ball bouncer? No. Okay. And if he bowled a slow ball bouncer, that means he listened to that voice. Then I track what was the success rate of that. Okay. So every time he has a voice, I'm tracking the success rate and the failure rate of him listening to it. If he didn't listen to his voice, then the data point is gone. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then from all of those data points where he did listen, I now start quantifying levels of importance, because not all skills would be the same and not all decisions are the same. So sometimes a voice could talk to you when you are, let's say, doing something that's relatively unimportant. Okay. And because it's unimportant, there's no harm in listening to that voice. So you listen to the voice.
Mm.
Okay. But you have a tendency to not listen to the voice when things are super important. So there'll be an intuition score based on varying degrees of importance as well. Okay. So I'm tracking all of this data.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm trying to teach them how to trust that voice a lot more.
That must be amazing. That must be a superpower. Now, interestingly, the intuition voice comes to you when it comes to you. And the moment you try to make sure that it should come to you more often, then it converts into ego, right? Is it a fair assumption to make?
Well, not that it should come to you more. No one's thinking that it should. The challenge with intuition is that you trust something once, okay, and you don't, and it works, and then it works 3 or 4 times, and then it doesn't work once, okay, and then you default back to, oh no, then the rational mind kicks in, or you try to get the rational mind to interpret the voice. If he's tapping into intuition in a high stress environment, in a high speed environment, in a certain state, it would be a state of flow. Okay. Now, when the next time he taps into that voice, but he tries to dissect that voice with his own perspective, then that's called rationalizing. So it's no more intuition, it's now conscious rationalization. If you apply a pretense of knowledge upon an information download, then it's no more an information download, it's consciousness. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's been weaponizing, is if Gaurav goes out and says, I am able to do this because I'm able to download information. Then you've weaponized intuition. And what does weaponizing mean? Weaponizing means you verbalize or vocalize a certain emotion, thought, feeling, or skill to get a reciprocal reaction.
Yeah. From others.
From others. Yeah.
Beautiful. So well articulated. I think it has given me a lot of clarity around intuition and flow and our conversation around ego and all the other questions that I had. They're still there. I'm sure we are going to tap into them at some point in time. Shyamal, thank you so much. Now, here I've got a couple of more questions.
Sure.
Let's say if you were to revisit your life,
Yeah.
what would you advise to your 21-year-old self?
The two pieces of advice that I always give to my younger self. The one is start investing early and not saving. So every time you earn something, take a little bit of money and invest it in a stock market or invest it somewhere where it can grow. First piece of advice. Second piece of advice is don't sabotage your own growth by thinking you don't have enough knowledge or experience. So try and fail.
Just dive in and then learn how to swim.
Dive in and then learn how to swim.
Yeah.
I sabotaged my own growth in many ways by constantly reiterating what the world was saying, by saying you're not experienced, you don't have enough, and when you sabotage yourself, you make the job easy for the person who didn't want to give it to you in the first place.
And keep yourself away from what you really deserve and what you ought to do in your life, the people that you need to serve, the voice that you need to serve within. So I can so much relate with that. When I started my coaching journey, and I sabotaged my own growth by listening to people who said we are looking for somebody with gray hair or no hair. So I know what you're talking about. So now, with the journey that you have traveled and traversed within, the understanding that you have gathered for yourself in the realm of three-dimensional world that we are living and the four-dimensional world that you are exploring, what do you know for sure with 100% surety and certainty?
What do I know for sure and 100% surety or certainty? Besides the fact that we're all going to die, I know that the life I would like to have is where I see myself living in a small community with just a few people who are friends, who deeply inspire me, and work in that and live in that ecosystem. Because I know a few things from what I've learned with the human body is that peak performance is not a sustainable state at all. It's balance is the most sustainable state for longevity and happiness. Okay. And I know that the world is pushing us towards numbers and metrics and things like that. And you can very easily become a slave to someone else's dream. It's very easy to become that today in this world. So the only thing that I know for sure is that I will one day build a very small community of people, right, who are held together through the emotions of kindness, love, and compassion, and are invested in a growth journey. And we'll just help each other and support each other. Beyond that, I don't know anything else.
Shukran, Shyamal. Such a profound way of closing this conversation. Let's build an ecosystem where we all can stay together with love, kindness, compassion, and have humanity in that ecosystem. So thank you so much. And look forward to see you soon sometime.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Thanks a lot.